Have you ever felt like you were trapped in an invisible web where your every move was monitored, evaluated, and somehow used against you? Have you experienced the sensation that your energy, your joy, your very essence was being drained, leaving you empty, exhausted, and questioning your own sanity? Perhaps you've encountered someone who seemed to have a special talent for turning light into shadow, trust into doubt, and love into a minefield of emotions. If so, I know exactly how you feel. Today, I'm going to share with you my own journey through one of the most complex and painful dynamics I've ever faced: a relationship with a narcissist. It wasn't just about manipulation or control. It was about the gradual erosion of my identity, the loss of my voice, and the annulment of my very existence. The exhaustion I felt wasn't just physical. It was a soul-deep exhaustion, a profound weariness from trying to please, from trying to be enough for someone who would never be satisfied. It was the pain of realizing that I had become a distorted reflection of someone else's expectations, losing sight of who I truly was. In a world where self-help often focuses on open communication and conflict resolution, dealing with a narcissist presents a unique challenge. The normal rules don't apply. My traditional tactics of dialogue and empathy became ammunition for him. That's why understanding this dynamic is crucial, not just for those in it, but for anyone seeking to protect their energy and inner peace. This isn't a video about revenge, but about my liberation. It's about how I regained control of my own life, even when it seemed like everything was beyond my reach. In this video, I'm going to share my story, Eleanor's story, and how I found a surprising and powerful way to break free. You'll discover how silence, the absence of reaction, and the establishment of unbreakable boundaries can be the most effective tools to disarm narcissistic manipulation and, more importantly, to rebuild your own life. We'll explore the roots of this dynamic, understand why I self-sacrificed, and finally, how I used my own sovereignty to break the cycle. By the end of this journey, you'll have a new perspective on the power of your own stillness and the strength that lies in not reacting. If you've ever felt this way, or know someone who has, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction helps us bring this message to more people who need it, and leave a comment below. What was your biggest struggle when dealing with someone who always seems to want to control the narrative? My name is Eleanor. I'm 38, and for years, my life felt less like my own and more like a perpetually open door. Not just a slightly ajar door, mind you, but one ripped off its hinges, inviting anyone and everyone to walk right in, track mud on the carpets, and demand a 5-course meal. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which, ironically, is a profession that demands meticulous boundaries. But I applied none of that to my own existence. My calendar wasn't just full, it was bursting, overflowing with commitments to others. Covering a colleague's rush project when they'd clearly mismanaged their time? Of course, I can help, I'd say. Organizing my sister's chaotic birthday parties, even though she barely lifted a finger? It's family, right? I'd think. Or simply being the perpetual sounding board for every friend's latest drama, absorbing their anxieties like a sponge. I used to believe that being this available, this responsive, made me valuable, indispensable even. That if I just said yes enough times, if I just helped enough people, I would finally earn my place, my worth. But beneath that veneer of helpfulness, a deep, silent exhaustion festered. It was a weariness that sleep couldn't fix, a constant hum of depletion that started in my bones and resonated through my soul. I felt like an emotional puppet, my limbs twitching and jerking with every tug on my strings, every desperate call for help, every veiled manipulation. I'd pick up the phone, my heart sinking, knowing it was another request, another demand on my dwindling reserves. There was a gnawing frustration inside me, a silent scream that no one heard, not even me, not consciously. I realized with a sickening lurch that my self-worth had become inextricably tied to my utility to others. I was their emergency button. Press for validation, press for distraction, press for comfort. And I, like a well-trained automaton, would respond. Each forced yes chipped away at me, little by little, leaving behind a void I couldn't explain. It was an emptiness that no amount of external praise could fill, a hunger that no amount of being there for others could satisfy. I was losing pieces of myself, scattered across 100 different favors, 1,000 different listening sessions. I was disappearing. I remember sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations. Every unsaid word where I should have stood my ground. Every unspoken silence where I should have walked away. Every disguised rejection from someone I'd given so much to, leaving me with a bitter taste. My soul felt permanently on its knees, begging for a crumb of attention, a morsel of appreciation that rarely, if ever, came freely. My energy drained in pathetic attempts to please, to justify my existence, to explain myself to people who weren't really listening. This made me predictable. Oh, so predictable. An emotional ATM, always ready to dispense comfort, advice, or an alibi. The pain was a constant, dull ache, a frustration I couldn't name, a weariness even sleep couldn't fix. How could I escape this trap? Could my own situation ever be resolved? I was diluted in the incessant search for a love that never truly came, because I didn't know how to give that love to myself. From a very young age, I was taught, subtly and not so subtly, that my worth lay in being the good girl, the helpful one. I remember being about 7 years old, and my mother, a woman who valued order and harmony above all else, would praise me effusively whenever I helped with chores without complaining, or when I gave my favorite toy to my younger brother. "Eleanor is so generous," she'd tell visitors, and I'd feel a warmth in my chest, a validation I craved. But if I dared to express a desire of my own that went against family harmony, or if I refused to do something, the silence and disapproval were palpable. There were no shouts, but a look of disappointment that hurt more than any scolding. I learned that love and acceptance were conditional, tied to my ability to self-sacrifice for the well-being of others. In my teenage years, this dynamic intensified. My best friend Sarah was full of energy, but also very demanding. She was always in some crisis, and I was the first one she'd call. I remember one time, I had an important date, but Sarah called me in tears because she'd had a fight with her boyfriend. Without hesitation, I canceled my plans to go comfort her. She hugged me, told me I was the best friend in the world, and I felt that familiar warmth of being indispensable. But deep down, there was a growing resentment. I was always there for her, but when I needed her, Sarah was conveniently busy. I rationalized. She has her own life. I'm stronger. I can handle it. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if I wasn't the always available friend, I would be abandoned. In college, this search for validation through utility manifested in my romantic relationships. My first serious boyfriend, Mark, was charming and charismatic, but also incredibly self-centered. He expected me to always be available for him, to listen to his problems, to support his dreams, to be his #1 fan. I bent over backward to please him, to be the perfect girlfriend. I canceled plans with friends, changed my study schedule, all to fit into his life. He rarely asked about my dreams or my struggles, and when I tried to express a need of my own, he'd minimize it or turn it into a criticism of my excessive sensitivity. I constantly felt insufficient, always trying to prove my worth, always seeking an approval that never came fully. With every yes I gave him, a piece of me crumbled. I was becoming an echo, a shadow, a diluted version of Eleanor, existing only to fill someone else's void. These experiences, and so many others, solidified a series of limiting beliefs within me, like invisible walls that surrounded me. My worth depends on what I do for others, was the first and strongest. Then came, my needs are less important. If I prioritize myself, I'll be selfish and unloved. And the most paralyzing of all, I need to be perfect to be accepted. I built my life around these beliefs, becoming the daughter, the friend, the professional that others wanted me to be. With every yes I gave to others, I was saying no to myself. Every time I put myself second, I reinforced the idea that I wasn't important enough. The wounded inner child that I was, that Eleanor of 7, 15, 20 years old, felt invisible, unheard, and constantly under the weight of unrealistic expectations. She carried the pain of never being good enough, the repressed anger from having her needs ignored, and the deep sadness of not being able to be herself, with her flaws and her qualities. There was a constant void within me, an insatiable hunger for recognition and unconditional love that was never satisfied because I sought that love outside, in others, and not within myself. This wounded child whispered her pains into my sleepless nights and my anxiety attacks. I was constantly seeking external validation, like an addict looking for their next fix, and each fix left me emptier than before. I didn't know how to escape this trap, this vicious cycle of self-annihilation and approval-seeking. The turning point wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, suffocating burn. It built up day after day until the air felt too thick to breathe. I remember one specific afternoon. I had just finished pulling an all-nighter, helping a colleague meet a ridiculously tight deadline for a presentation that wasn't even mine. I was bone-tired, my eyes gritty, and I just wanted to crawl into bed. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend, someone I'd bent over backward for countless times, someone I'd considered a cornerstone of my support system. The message was a casual, almost dismissive criticism about a small detail in a project I'd volunteered to help her with weeks ago. No thank you. No acknowledgement of my efforts. Just a critique, as if my labor was something she was entitled to. It felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal that stung even more than the exhaustion. After years of unwavering support, always being there, this was my reward. Or perhaps it was just the inexplicable emptiness that settled over me after another day of being on for everyone else. I was in my small studio apartment, the city hum a distant murmur outside, the scent of stale coffee clinging to the air. I looked around at the quiet space, feeling utterly hollowed out, drained of all vitality. What was left of me when I wasn't busy serving someone else's needs? Who was Eleanor, stripped of her role as the ever-available helper? It was in that raw, exposed moment, while scrolling aimlessly online, that I stumbled upon a quote by Carl Jung. It wasn't the first time I'd seen his name, but this time the words hit me with the force of revelation. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It was like a sudden, jarring light had been switched on in a dark room. The constant irritation, the feeling of being used, the resentment bubbling beneath my polite smiles. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about Mark's demands or Sarah's casual dismissals. It was about my own porous boundaries. It was about my unconscious need to please, to earn love and validation by being indispensable. The irritation was a mirror reflecting my own lack of self-worth. It was then that Jungian psychology, particularly the concept of individuation, emerged as a guiding light. The idea of becoming a fully authentic, complete self, independent of external validation, resonated deeply within my weary soul. It was a lifeline in an ocean of self-negation. The thought that I could be whole simply by being me without needing anyone else's approval felt both terrifying and profoundly liberating. My first steps were tentative, fraught with guilt. I remember staring at my phone, a text from a friend asking for a last-minute favor, and for the first time, not replying immediately. The silence stretched, and my heart hammered in my chest. What would they think? Would they be angry? Would they abandon me? When I finally crafted a polite no, explaining that I had prior commitments, which was true, my commitment to my own sanity, the discomfort was immense. Friends raised eyebrows. Some even accused me of changing, of becoming selfish. It felt alien, almost wrong, to prioritize my own peace over their immediate demands. But I kept going. I started choosing silence instead of an impulsive reaction. I started taking my time. The initial discomfort was immense. It felt like I was shedding an old skin, raw and exposed. Every no, every moment of chosen silence felt like a small act of rebellion against a lifetime of conditioning. There were moments of intense guilt, a nagging voice in my head whispering that I was letting people down, that I was being unkind. But as I slowly, deliberately withdrew my excessive availability, something profound began to shift within me. The initial discomfort gave way to a nascent inner peace, fragile at first, but undeniably present. It was like a faint, beautiful melody emerging from a cacophony of demands. My vital energy, once scattered and depleted, like dust motes dancing in sunlight, began to coalesce. Slowly, painstakingly, it started returning to me. It was a tangible sensation, a gradual feeling of my own strength seeping back into my veins, invigorating my mind. I started to understand that selective unavailability wasn't a punishment for others. It was an act of profound self-love and sovereignty. It was about reclaiming my own space, my own time, my own very being. This wasn't about being mean or aloof. It was about honoring the precious resource that was me. One of the most striking lessons came through understanding the Jungian concept of the shadow. Jung suggested that what irritates us about others often reflects something unacknowledged within ourselves. I used to see others' rejection as the problem. When someone pulled away because I wasn't instantly available, I'd blame them or myself for not being enough. But the more I sat in my discomfort, the more I chose silence instead of chasing after their fleeting attention, the clearer it became. The shadow, for me, wasn't just their rejection. It was my own inability to love myself and set boundaries. It was the fear of being truly alone, unapproved, unneeded, that drove my desperate need to please. Confronting this part of myself was painful, like looking directly into a harsh light, but it was also incredibly liberating. I was no longer a victim of their actions, but an agent of my own. I started experimenting with periods of sacred solitude. This wasn't depressive isolation, mind you. It was a conscious choice to carve out time and space where no one could make demands on me. I'd sit in my apartment, sometimes just drinking tea, sometimes sketching, sometimes simply staring out the window. The silence, initially, was deafening. My mind, used to constant external stimuli and the chatter of other people's problems, would race. It was uncomfortable. Old anxieties would surface. But in that discomfort, I started to hear a different voice, my own. It was a quiet voice, almost a whisper at first, but it was authentic. It told me what I truly wanted, what I truly needed, what my boundaries were. This phase was essential for truly hearing my own voice, suffocated for so long by so much external noise. I remember a specific instance. My friend, Sarah, called, frantic about a minor issue in her personal life. In the past, I would have dropped everything, offered immediate solutions, or rushed over. This time, I listened, truly listened, without automatically jumping in to fix it. Then, instead of saying, "I'll be right there," or "Let me take care of it," I simply said, "I hear you, Sarah. That sounds really tough. What do you think your next step should be?" There was a beat of silence on her end, a surprise in her voice, and then she actually started brainstorming her own solutions. It was a small moment, but it was a revelation. Choosing silence, choosing non-reaction, wasn't abandonment. It was empowering her, and more importantly, it was me reclaiming sovereignty over myself. This journey wasn't a straight line. There were days I slipped back into old habits, days I felt the powerful pull of guilt, trying to drag me back to my old self. But each time, the memory of that suffocating emptiness, that deep weariness, pulled me forward. The more I chose silence, the more I conserved my psychic energy. It was like having a leaky bucket for years, and now, finally, the holes were being patched. I wasn't constantly pouring my essence into others' emotional voids, leaving myself dry. Instead, that energy began to pool within me, creating a reservoir of calm and strength I hadn't known was possible. I started to notice small, yet significant changes. My focus at work, as a graphic designer, sharpened. Ideas flowed more easily, and I found genuine enjoyment in my creative process again, something that had been lost amidst the constant demands. I wasn't just reacting to client needs, I was proactively creating, fueled by my own internal drive, not the desperate need for external validation. This newfound energy translated into better quality work and, surprisingly, even more appreciation from clients who valued my clear boundaries and efficient communication. It was a win-win, something I never thought possible when my life was dictated by constant availability. The realization dawned that I wasn't losing people who truly mattered. I was, in fact, shedding those who only valued my utility. It was a painful, yet ultimately liberating, purge. Some friendships, the ones built on my constant availability and their constant need, naturally withered. There were fewer frantic calls, fewer late-night texts seeking emotional support without reciprocation. It was quiet, sometimes lonely, but this silence was different. It wasn't the silence of neglect, but the quiet hum of peace. It was the space where authentic connections could finally breathe and grow, if they were meant to. I saw who truly stayed or walked away, and the surprise was profound. The people who remained were the ones who respected my boundaries, who valued me for who I was, not just what I could do for them. This phase was crucial for understanding individuation, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience. It was the painful yet liberating process of becoming whole, without the need for emotional crumbs from anyone else. I was no longer a fractured reflection of other people's expectations, but a consolidating, singular entity. It was about integrating all parts of myself, even the messy, less-than-perfect bits, into a coherent whole. The need for external validation, which had once been a powerful addiction, began to lose its grip. It was like breaking free from a long-held enchantment. Their opinions still registered, but they no longer held the power to dictate my mood or my self-worth. I found myself saying no with a newfound calm, explaining my choices not with guilt, but with conviction. When my sister called, assuming I'd organize her next chaotic birthday party, I gently but firmly told her I wouldn't be able to this year, and that I was confident she could manage it beautifully herself. Her initial reaction was a mix of surprise and annoyance, but the world didn't end. She grumbled, but she figured it out, and I, for the first time, felt a genuine sense of relief, not guilt. That relief was a powerful affirmation that I was on the right path. The most incredible reward of this journey was the growing presence of internal validation. Before, my sense of self was like a leaky boat, needing constant bailing out with compliments or affirmations from others. Now, I found myself less concerned with what others thought, and more attuned to what I felt. It wasn't about arrogance. It was about a quiet, deep-seated confidence that came from within. The quiet satisfaction of choosing my peace over someone else's fleeting demand became more fulfilling than any external praise. I remember another pivotal moment. I was at a networking event for freelance designers, an environment that used to trigger my old habits of people-pleasing and trying to impress everyone. I'd walk into these rooms feeling like I needed to perform, to be the most charming, the most helpful, the most indispensable. But this time, it was different. I found myself observing, listening more than talking, engaging in conversations that genuinely interested me, and politely excusing myself from those that felt draining. I wasn't there to gain approval. I was there to connect, authentically. When someone asked for a last-minute favor that clearly overstepped a boundary, I smiled, and without hesitation or guilt, explained that my schedule was full. There was no internal turmoil, no frantic justification, just a simple, clear no. And to my surprise, the person simply accepted it. No drama, no pressure. It was a subtle yet powerful affirmation of my newfound strength. This newfound clarity also acted as a powerful filter. Conscious unavailability wasn't just about protecting my energy. It was about filtering out toxic people and situations. Like a finely tuned sieve, it let through only what was genuine and nourishing. The superficial relationships, the ones based on my utility, began to fade. This created space, not just empty space, but sacred space, for more authentic connections to emerge. I found myself drawn to people who respected boundaries, who valued mutual exchange, and who weren't afraid of quiet moments. My circle became smaller, but infinitely richer. The quality of my relationships deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. I also noticed a significant shift in my perspective on setbacks. In the past, any criticism or perceived failure would send me spiraling, triggering that familiar, desperate need to fix, to prove my worth. Now, when a client had feedback, I could approach it objectively, without internalizing it as a personal failing. My self-worth wasn't on the line with every project. This allowed me to learn and grow more effectively, without the emotional baggage. It was as if I had built an internal sanctuary, a place where I could retreat and simply be, impervious to the external storms. The surprise of seeing who truly stayed or walked away was profound. Some people who I thought were cornerstones of my life drifted away, unable to adapt to the new Eleanor, the one who wasn't constantly available. And while that sting of loss was real, it was quickly overshadowed by the profound relief of knowing that these relationships, built on such shaky ground, were no longer draining my life force. The ones who remained, or new connections that formed, were truly invaluable. They were people who saw me, truly saw me, beyond my usefulness. The journey isn't without its challenges. The ingrained patterns of a lifetime won't disappear overnight. There are still moments when the old urges surface, the instinct to jump in, to rescue, to people please. But now I have the tools, the awareness, and the inner strength to recognize them for what they are. Echoes of an old self, not dictates of my present. It's a continuous process, this path to true freedom and authenticity, to my own individuation. It's like tending a garden. You have to keep weeding out the old habits, nurturing the new growth. I've learned that true strength doesn't come from saying yes to everyone else, but from saying a firm, loving yes to myself. My peace is not something to be earned through endless availability, but a sacred space to be fiercely protected. It's my inner sanctuary, the wellspring from which all my creativity, my joy, and my authentic connections flow. And if protecting that peace means being misunderstood or even disliked by those who benefited from my old self, then so be it. The price of true self-ownership is worth it. I now understand that the love I so desperately begged for could only be born from me to me. There was a moment not long ago where this truth solidified into an unshakable conviction. My phone rang. It was Mark, my ex-boyfriend, calling late on a Friday evening with a super urgent request that could easily wait until Monday. The old Eleanor would have felt a surge of panic, a desperate need to immediately address it, to prove her dedication. But the new Eleanor felt a calm detachment. I looked at the screen, and for the first time, I felt no compulsion, no anxiety. I let it ring, and then I turned off my phone. It wasn't a defiant act, but a peaceful one. I spent the evening doing something that brought me genuine joy, sketching for myself, not for a client, not for anyone else's approval. The next morning, I addressed Mark's request calmly and efficiently during business hours. The world didn't end. My peace remained intact. This was the crucial turning point, the moment I felt finally free from external control and fully connected to my essence. It was an overwhelming insight. Conscious unavailability is sovereignty over oneself. It's choosing to be misunderstood and rejected, or even hated, in the name of your inner freedom. It's paying the price of being you. And in that choice, there is an intense joy, a profound peace, even if it means being alone among the strong. It's being home within myself, finally. The person who begged for love dissolved, giving way to someone who, in silence, found wholeness. Looking back, the sacrifices were real. The loss of certain friendships, the discomfort of confronting my own fears and shadows, the guilt that sometimes still tries to creep in. But the gains, they are immeasurable. More peace, more energy, more authentic relationships, a deeper connection to myself than I ever thought possible, the quiet joy of simply being. If you're listening to this, and Eleanor's story has resonated with you, if you feel that familiar ache of being spread too thin, of constantly giving until you're empty, know that there is a way forward. If you're ready to reclaim your own energy, your own peace, and embark on your journey of selective self-protection, then take that first step. It might be terrifying, it might feel selfish, but it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Are you ready to be misunderstood and rejected, or even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being you? It's a profound question, and the answer, for me, became crystal clear. I choose my peace. And I hope, in your own way, you choose yours too. Hey everyone, if Eleanor's journey truly spoke to your heart, and you found a piece of your own story within hers, please consider joining our community by subscribing. Your support helps us create more content that hopefully sparks meaningful reflection and self-discovery. I'd also love to hear from you directly. Has anything in Eleanor's experience particularly resonated with you? What's one thing you've learned about setting boundaries or finding your own peace? Share your stories and insights in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all support each other on this journey.